Hi, folks. Mr. Coleman here to give you another component of the January Senior Seminar. In this video, I'll be talking about how to analyze financial aid award letters, and if you're interested, how to pursue a financial aid appeal. So it's important for today that you understand expenses, direct and indirect expenses, how to look at a sample award letter, questions that you want to consider as you analyze your letters, and then the process to pursue a financial aid appeal. So first things first, I found this graphic that I thought might be helpful as we talk about expenses. All right. So first, there's some expenses that we expect as relates to college and some that maybe we don't. Things like room and board and tuition are things that we tend to expect, as well as books and school supplies. However, things like your equipment and room materials or your travel and miscellaneous expenses, like your if you're buying clothes or technology for yourself or other that aren't related necessarily to school supplies but to like your lifestyle, those may not be expected costs, and as a result they may not be costs that you immediately factor in as you're considering how much money you need to pursue a college program. Similarly, when we're thinking about direct expenses versus indirect expenses, direct expenses are they tend to be clearer when you're looking at financial aid award letters because those are the expenses that you pay directly to the institution. That's why we call them direct. These indirect expenses, like books and school supplies, equipment and room materials, and then your travel and miscellaneous expenses, those are important expenses to be aware of, but they're not expenses you pay directly to an institution, so they may not be included on a financial aid award letter, which is why we want you thinking about these costs so that you can better estimate, well, what exactly will you need? What will you need? Because we do not want you in a situation where you've graduated from Jones and you're pursuing a degree program and all of a sudden you're not exactly sure how you're going to be able to pay, right? Or there's an expense that you have that you didn't think about that now is going to make it difficult for you to attend. All right. Here we have a financial aid award letter, a sample. All right. This tends to be how financial aid award letters are laid out, but they change, right? And it varies from school to school. One of the reasons being there is no set mandate on the structure necessarily, but also schools to varying degrees are going to be transparent with you on what exactly you can expect to pay. Why is that? Because at the end of the day, they are trying to motivate you to attend, right? So if you necessarily were aware of all of the pieces, it may deter your decision to apply, and they're not looking for that. So when we're thinking about financial aid award letters, some things we want to think about. What is your COA, the cost of attendance? In the purple box here in this letter, that includes your direct expenses and your indirect expenses. Can you look in that box and determine which ones are direct and which ones are indirect? Because the tuition and fees and room and board are considered direct expenses because you pay those directly to the institution. And your books, personal travel, miscellaneous, computer, those are considered indirect expenses. But for the purposes of analyzing a financial aid award letter, you need to see which direct expenses are included, which indirect expenses are included. Are there any expenses that are direct or indirect that are missing? In this situation, the school is given an estimate of, books, materials, and supplies, personal travel, miscellaneous expenses, and computer. That may not always be the case when you're looking at a financial aid award letter. And if you don't have something like that, you can estimate for yourselves as a family, and you can also reach out to the financial aid office to get a sense of if they have any estimates available when it comes to some of those indirect expenses. And in the pink box, I've laid out here the actual aid being offered to this hypothetical student. And you'll notice this federal Perkins loan, Stafford loan, the language has changed in the last few years. The federal Perkins loan program no longer exists, but there are federal subsidized and unsubsidized direct loans. Subsidized really just means that the interest on those loans the government pays for while you're pursuing the degree program at least half time. And the unsubsidized program means that the government does not subsidize the interest during your degree program. And that's something, an additional cost you will be responsible for. Okay. So that top section is the loan section, right? Schools do consider loans as part of your aid package, even though in reality, that's a self help aid option because you have to take out that money and pay it back later with interest. And that second section in the pink box, you see a majority of the free money. The institutional scholarship, the federal Pell Grant, the FSEOG, state scholarships, great. This is all the free money. The federal work study is technically free money, but keep in mind it's something that you have to work toward in order to earn during your degree program. Okay? So when we're thinking about different formulas to help you answer the one of the most important questions, which how much am I going to actually have to pay out of pocket? What is the gap for me, right? You want to take your cost of attendance, the combination of direct and indirect expenses, all right? Then subtract the anticipated aid, okay? And that will give you the gap. How much more money would you need to find? How many more scholarship programs might you need to apply to? How much money might you need to pool as a family, etc. All right? So in this example, the estimated cost of attendance is $38,400, and the aid inclusive of federal work study and the loans is $28,400, leaving a gap of $10,000 for this prospective student. Okay? So this is a formula that we want you to use when you're looking at your own financial aid award letters. What's my cost of attendance? How much aid is anticipated? And then what's the gap? Okay, especially if you're thinking about applying for additional private scholarships using programs like CPS Academic Works or College Greenlight. You know what? You want to FastWeb, you want to make sure you have a clear sense how much additional money do I need to find in order to afford my education? Okay? So as you're looking at financial aid award letters, some of the questions, and I've been asking them as I've continued, you also want to look at, is any of this aid renewable? Okay. So when looking at, for example, the school scholarship, right, or the state scholarship, are those renewable? Which, because you're only going to see in a financial aid award letter the aid description for the first year, for that freshman year, right? You don't necessarily know immediately what your other years might look like. And that can be a tricky point because some schools will give you a wonderful package for your freshman year that they pull back pieces of as you continue. So you want to know, looking at your aid, how much of this is renewable. And if it's not clear in your financial aid award letter, another reason to call the financial aid office and ask. You also want to think about, how does this offer compare to any offers from other schools? And there are some great comparison tools. I'll show you one in a second that helps you lay out the different aid from different schools and compare them to each other to determine in the end how much money do you need to secure for yourselves on top of the aid that's being offered. We already talked a little bit about, is the aid free or self-help? You know what, your work study and loans being the self-help aid, the free money being the grants and scholarships, okay? Do you want to accept the whole offer or just parts? Keep in mind, when you're looking at a financial aid letter, you don't have to accept the whole thing. You can look at pieces. For example, if you're not particularly interested as an individual or as a family in taking out loans, you can reject that part. But keep in mind, that money then goes into the column of your gap, your out-of-pocket expense, or you have to find another way to secure that money. You really want to think about, can you and your family afford the out-of-pocket expense, that gap? Is that reasonable for you and your family, right? And if it is reasonable, how do you know? And those are some very real, practical conversations you need to be having as a family. Can you stack the outside aid? So if you're looking at a financial aid award letter, they've included, this federal aid, the institutional aid like the school scholarship, all right, more federal aid here, the state scholarship, federal work study. If you have other private scholarships, right, that are giving you money, or more money coming from other family members or other benefactors, your college and university may not know about it. They do expect you to let them know, however, so they can adjust your award letter accordingly. What you need to know is if you have a other private scholarship or additional aid coming to you that's not included here, how does it affect the award letters that you've been offered? All right. Sometimes schools will say that your other private scholarships are stackable, which means you can add them on top of the aid you've already received. A good amount of the time, they'll say, actually, if you have other private scholarships, then that's just going to reduce the amount of aid we're going to offer you. Because again, schools are thinking about practically how much money do you need in order to pursue their degree program. All right. So you want to know whether or not it's stackable. Many letters won't make that clear. So, yet it's another reason that you will want to call admissions to clarify. All right. And then that big question of, do you need to secure additional outside aid? Once you have a sense of the gap, right, the out of pocket expense needed, right, on top of the aid that you've been offered at an institution, that helps you better target how much money you need to fundraise for yourselves. Okay. Shifting gears, let's say you're looking at a letter and you're like, this isn't going to work for me. This isn't going to work for me and my family. All right. You want to call the financial aid office, not email them, call them, right? And in preparation for that call, always recommend that you gather your evidence. How do you know that this is not workable for you and your family, right? Is it that your family doesn't want to pay this, or that your family cannot actually financially afford it? Those are two very different situations. And if your family cannot afford it, be very specific with how you know. Is it based on a loss of income or employment in your household? It is based off of other folks in the household who are pursuing education or health related concerns or medical expenses. Like, how do you know specifically that gap is not affordable for you and your family? You want to be respectful and honest with the financial aid admissions office, but you want to keep it short, right? You don't have to give them a flowery story where you obscure details. Be as specific and clear as you can with, this is the amount of money specifically I need to make this affordable, and here are the reasons why. They will likely ask you to gather additional documentation to submit to them so that they can confirm what you're saying is accurate, right? And then they'll tell you how they want you to submit your financial aid appeal documentation. It could be an email to the person that you spoke to on the phone. It could be through some other process, but they'll tell you how they expect your formal appeal to go. All right. And then they'll make sure you know how much time it will take them to review, and they'll come back. Worst they can tell you is no, right? But we want you to be very clear that you have the opportunity to appeal if you know, based on the information provided and the evidence that you have, the gap will not be affordable for you and your family. Okay? So when it comes to additional resources, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a wonderful financial aid analyzer. It's going to walk you through. In order to complete that, you need like a financial aid award letter, any loan documentation that you have, and it's going to ask you for specific information and tell you, like, okay, based on this information, here's the gap and here's what your next step should be. There's also the ISAC. We love ISAC and work a lot with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. They have an award letter comparison tool. It's a great online tool where it asks you different questions about like the direct expenses, indirect expenses, the aid, be it loans, work study, grants, scholarships, etc. And then it gives you the opportunity to compare multiple schools to each other as long as you have that information available to you. The youth money management lessons, this is a great tool. It's like an 8-lesson series that really just helps youth understand how to manage your money, right? And talk specifically about financial aid, of course, but just broadly, what do you need to be thinking about around managing your finances as you transition to college or other post-secondary options? Really helpful to note. And then last, we have the U.S. News and World Report appeals best practices, right? A lot of different places will tell you similar information when it comes to the best practices related to financial aid appeals. US News and World Report is just one that takes many of these ideas and expounds on them in greater detail. All right. That's all I have for you in this video. We look forward to seeing you in junior, my goodness, in senior seminar. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with your counselor directly, and we can better assist you as relates to financial planning. Take care, folks.